Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. Today is Frugal Friday, which is kind of maybe becoming a staple in my channel, a series. And of course, I will throw this out to you guys, an open invitation to please share below any of your frugal money saving ideas, things that you might do or things that you have heard of others doing that might help the greater community here on Authentically Amber. Please feel free to share. So today I wanted to share with you a couple excerpts from the Tightwad Gazette. Amy Dacyczyn wrote this book years and years ago. And you know, some of this, I've been rereading this. Actually, I have finished reading the first one and I'm rereading the second as well. But it's kind of funny going through it again after all these years. Some of the information is very dated, but some of the information, you know, just kind of transcends time. And some of it is just a broader scope of mindfulness in, you know, saving money. So today, the first little bit I wanted to read to you is called, the section is called Seeking the Minimum Level. And I thought it was really good, something to think about. So I wanted to read this little portion to you guys. So she says, people are creatures of habit. It's so true. We do things because we have always done them that way, or because our parents always did them that way, or because a teacher taught us that way, or because an expert said to do it that way. We seldom challenge why we do things the way we do. As a result, we persist in expensive behavior purely out of habit. This is so true sometimes, isn't it? To form new frugal habits, develop an awareness about all the small actions you do every day. Explore new ways to do things. Seek the minimum level. Scale down step by step until the process does not work satisfactorily for your standards. Then bump it up one level. She says, for instance, when you wash dishes, do you always fill the sink to the top? If you're doing a small number of dishes, a sink halfway full of water would suffice. Do you always put a 2-second squirt of dishwashing liquid in the water? See if a 1-second squirt would work. That's so true, because sometimes I know, of course, most of our dishes we load in the dishwasher, but sometimes, you know, we have to wash pans by hand or some other thing, larger pieces. But, you know, sometimes you just kind of squirt a lot of soap in there. And sometimes I do think that was probably too much, but it's already out of the bottle, isn't it? So yeah, scaling back a little might be a good idea. Or she says, measure it in a teaspoon so that you can have an accurate gauge. You know, it depends on what you're willing to do. That's probably another step that I'm not willing to do, but for some, they might. When you wash laundry, do you always put the recommended amount of detergent in each load? Isn't it handy the way the manufacturers provide you with a plastic scoop in each box so you never think about using less? And that, of course, is if you're using the powder, but same thing on the liquid, if you're using liquid and versus the pods, of course. But the liquid, you know, they have the fill line, and usually that is way more than what is actually needed. So she says, think about how dirty each load is and add detergent accordingly. Often a half scoop would work as well. And that's probably true. Half of what the manufacturer recommends is probably just the right amount. Because did you know that sometimes using too much detergent, and I definitely know from my repairman that using too much of the liquid fabric softener is a bad thing, especially for my front loader. It got all gummed up. So we no longer use the liquid fabric softener. All right, and then she says, our grandmothers boiled cloth diapers, our mothers bleached them. Experiment with your laundering procedure. Can you use less bleach? Do you need bleach? You know, and that sort of thing. And she says, moving on to the dryer, if your dryer doesn't have a moisture sensor, which of course the newer ones do, But do you always set the dial at a certain point? Try setting it for less time and see how that works out. She says, do you use an inch of toothpaste because a brush has an inch long rows of bristles every time toothpaste advertisement, and I'm sorry, let's start that again. And every toothpaste advertisement you've ever seen portrays a neat, full bristle length swath. That is so true. On the commercials, do they use just a little tiny pea size? No. Yeah, they use way too much, don't they, on the commercials? Experiment to see if a ½ an inch of toothpaste works just as well. And of course, the real trick is in the actual action of brushing, not so much the toothpaste. The toothpaste helps, but when you pour bath water, do you usually fill the bathtub to 8 inches deep when 4 would do just the same? When you shampoo, do you experiment to find the least amount that will work? And I know I definitely probably in the past have used too much. Yeah, that's some things to work on. When you shower, do you need to wash your hair every time? Or do you need to shower every day? Or would a sponge bath suffice on days when you're not going to work? If you blow dry your hair, are there days when air drying would be suitable? Yes. Yes, I try to do that. Do you need the full makeup regimen every day? Maybe some days you could scale it down, not use eye makeup or not use any at all. If I'm just around the house, everything is all natural. And she says, when you are baking, do you always set the timer for the recommended time? Maybe your oven thermostat is high. Sometimes I think mine is. And your oven bakes faster. Try checking for doneness a few minutes early. Do you follow recipes exactly or do you experiment? In baking, you can try to use less sugar, eggs, and oil. Find the point where you notice a significant taste difference and then increase the sugar, eggs, or oil slightly. When you eat and drink, do you always fill plates and cups full? Maybe a partial cup of coffee or a smaller portion would satisfy you as much. That's so true, isn't it? Sometimes we have a big plate or we have a mug or a big cup, and you know, the tendency is to fill everything full when maybe, like she says, maybe half would do. Something to think about, right? If you have a chocolate craving at the checkout line, do you really need the extra large size chocolate bar? Maybe a small peppermint patty would satisfy you. I've tried this in the past. It does help. Of course, these days I don't eat candy bars, but back in the days when I used to. Do you always buy brand name foods because your one experiment with store brands was unsatisfactory? Keep experimenting to find the lower cost brands that work for your needs. And bear in mind, just because a brand tastes different, it doesn't mean it tastes worse. That's true. Could your heat thermostat be set lower? Move it down and put on a sweater. How high is your water heater? How high is your water heater set? Turn it down to 125 degrees. Do not experiment lower because it needs to be this hot to kill bacteria. Could any of your lights be a lower wattage, especially in the hallways? And then she says, how many gifts do you give for birthdays? Would fewer be just as satisfying? And she talks about how she set a $50 limit on the total costs of gifts and the party, but often found that they could do it for $25. That's pretty amazing. And I think she had like 6 kids, I think. Pretty amazing. If you find your reduced spending level is not quite satisfactory, increase the budget slightly. Most important, when you establish your budget, do you always spend the allowed amount, or do you try to spend less on the areas of your budget that are flexible? When you seek the minimum level, you may be breaking old habits. Give yourself time to get used to the new lower level. It may take a few months to adjust so that the change feels comfortable. And at that point, try the experiment again. And I thought that was great advice. Timeless, really. And that's why I wanted to share it, because it's food for thought, right? Sometimes we are creatures of habit. At least I know I am. You know, you have these ruts in your brain, and your brain just does things because it's always done things that way, and that's the way we do them. Rarely questioning why we do it or the amounts that we use, etc. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there, food for thought. And maybe you might be thinking of an area in your budget that you could really apply this to. The other section I wanted to share with you on page 230 of the Tightwad Gazette book here is how to avoid feeling deprived. I thought this was a really good little article, and this one, let's see, it's not very long. She says, our brass kerosene lamp gives off a warm glow, enough to provide the additional needed light for our dinner of hot cornmeal biscuits and refrigerator stew made of leftover bean soup and random freezer finds. The children, ruddy from outdoor play, consume without question. Jim's comment that the stew is good bespeaks the chancy nature of leftover cookery, kind of throwing everything together. I find myself curbing a smile. I would have the same strange satisfaction had the meal been less successful. I have the same feeling when I adjust my ancient see-through sock so that the hole doesn't line up with my big toe. When I have time, I'll darn it. Have you guys darned socks? I remember growing up, my grandmother, who lived to be 98, but probably she was in her 80s, she would darn socks. I thought that was remarkable. She would put a light bulb inside the sock and then darn it. I can't say I've ever done that, but hats off to all of you who have. She says, I can afford new ones, talking about her socks, but I have a secret quest to see how long I can make the old ones last. I think that's awesome. And I can kind of identify with that whole challenge thing. I love a good challenge. I think I've mentioned this before. I'm very competitive, even with myself or against my existing budget. I'm always looking for ways to where I can save. So maybe you are too. The feeling occurs again when Jim completes a building project, Jim being her husband, on the table saw that had been intercepted on the way to the dump, overhauled and mounted on a curb-gleaned frame of a deep fat fryer. My attitude has undergone a complete reversal. A decade ago, I enjoyed prime rib at the Ritz-Carlton and purchased expensive toys for my nieces and nephews. Even today, when excess would not stand between us and our goals, we still enjoy being frugal. In general, we prefer low-cost meals, used acquisitions, and free entertainment. This attitude reversal lies at the heart of why we have never felt deprived while sustaining our lifestyle for so many years. The feeling of deprivation will undermine any effort to pursue long-term disciplines. I think that's the key, right? It's a discipline learned over time. The dieter will fail as long as he hates low-calorie food. The would-be athlete will fail as long as he hates exertion. Yeah, true. The tightwad wannabe will fail as long as he views frugality as a lifestyle he has to endure or was forced into by circumstance. To overcome the feeling of deprivation, consider the following 3 points. First, recognize that you are engaging in the discipline out of choice. I think that's very, very true. You decide to give up something so you can have something else. And that's true with weight loss too, right? We give up the candy bars and the high calorie foods because we want better health and we want to maybe feel better about ourselves or feel better in general, right? Same with the whole budget deal. You give up one trade-offs, right? She says, if you think I eat leftovers because I have to, you view yourself as being deprived. Instead, think I eat leftovers because curbing my food bill is something I can do to reach my goal. And that is so good. It's viewing, instead of feeling deprived, you're viewing it as an opportunity, a vehicle to get you to where you want to go. And I love that. Second, as you cut back, give up expenses in the order of the ones that provide the least value for the dollars spent. The order of elimination will differ from tightwad to tightwad. In the beginning, Jim and I ate out more. After a less than spectacular meal of stuffed lobster, we agreed to give up restaurant meals altogether, which that can be huge. We did not enjoy them enough for the cost. So I like what she says about, is the value there for you? Does it mean that much to you? And that will vary person to person because we all have varying priorities, right? She says, during one of my speaking engagements, a woman told me her husband was a chef and loved to eat out. In their case, they probably received sufficient value from the restaurant meals to continue going out. They needed to find other things to give up first. That's what was important to them, right? View giving up extras as transferring funds from one area of your life to another. I like that. I like that a lot. I am the first to admit that there is nothing frugal about 6 kids and a 2,200 square foot, 100-year-old farmhouse. That's what they had at the time. To afford this, we slashed expenses in the areas of food, entertainment, and clothing. Slashing your housing costs to spend more on food, entertainment, and clothing would be equally acceptable as long as you live within your means and are on track in the pursuit of your goals. To assess your values, constantly ask yourself if you receive sufficient value for the money spent. And that is really good. That's a good exercise in general because, so often in this age of, the actual cash not leaving our hands, either we're using plastic or purchasing online, there is that disconnect that I've talked about. There's that emotional disconnect. There's that kind of rational disconnect where we are no longer asking ourselves, honestly, is it a value? We're just kind of doing things because we're in a hurry. We're under pressure for time, We're just not asking ourselves those hard questions. Is this really important to me? Is it worth, X amount of hours, however many hours it required to make that money? Sometimes I think of that in terms of, we're a one-income family. My husband is the sole breadwinner. So I think of, okay, how many hours did my husband have to work to make this purchase? And so when you boil, purchases down in those terms, or even if, obviously, if you're the breadwinner, if you're working, ask yourself, how many hours did I have to work to make this purchase? And is it worth it to me? Is it worth the trade-off? I'm giving someone my money, but I had to work 3 hours for that or whatever, however many hours it is. Is it worth it? Those are very good questions to ask. You might be surprised at the answer. And, so often it's not a matter of can we afford it? Maybe we can afford it, but I think the better question is this the best use of this money? Or do I have higher priorities? Do I have things that I want to accomplish? We definitely are working on some goals. And so, yeah, I'm always thinking about that. All right, let's get back to what she's talking about here. She says, people commonly make the mistake of spending money on smaller items that are low on their priority list. And as a result, they cannot afford the big things high on their list. And that's true. Real deprivation is not being able to afford the things that are high on your priority list. When assessing your values, think back to the concept of transferring funds from one area of your budget to the other. Think about the trade-offs and redefine deprivation. True. Instead of being a matter of eating more leftovers or wearing used clothes, maybe deprivation is having to work a second job you hate, or stress from massive debt, or not being able to afford another child. That's true, isn't it? So reframing the attitude of feeling deprived, right? She brings up a valid point, I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So she continues, when you give up the lower priority things first, hopefully your budget will allow you to keep the extras that genuinely give value to your life. However, if you find you still need to cut more, think back to your goal. This is kind of the same with weight loss. There's a lot of things overlapping concepts here because, you know, with our weight loss, we have to think back to our why. Same thing with our budgeting. So yes, and then also she says, do not compare your economic situation to those of others. And that is so true, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. Yep. If you are trying to, she says, if you're trying to lose weight, it can be frustrating to watch a thin person eat twice as much as you. Having a slow metabolism just means you have to work harder. If your income is less than someone else's, you will have to eliminate more from your priority list to achieve the same goal. Jim and I knew that we had to work harder than our parents and our grandparents to afford a similar home. We had nothing to gain by bemoaning today's higher interest rates. And that was, of course, at the time of this writing, which was in the 90s. Wringing your hands over economic inequities merely wastes emotional energy that could be better used in a positive way to achieve your goal. Accept the givens in your situation and work with them. Very good advice. Feeling empowered by recognizing you are choosing to scale down to reach a goal, eliminating expenses in order of least value received, and accepting the givens in your personal economic situation are aspects of beginner tightwadery. I love that. I think that's very good. Beyond this, there is a higher plane of enlightenment. You progress to a state of mind where you develop an aversion to stupid expenditures. Amen. As defined within your own personal value system. They become symbols of darkness that have been placed in your path to thwart your efforts. So yeah, I think that's really awesome. So I think that's about the gist of what I wanted to share with you. But I just think that's such good advice to, you know, not worry about feeling deprived by comparing our situation with someone else's. You know, it's kind of like if you're an athlete, right? Most of the time, there will always be someone who is faster than you, who may be in better shape than you. And same thing with our finances, right? But we don't need to compare ourselves with others, but we do need to constantly just kind of reevaluate our budget and those things that are important to us, the things that we say are priorities to us, and attach our money to those priorities, and maybe kind of scale back and say no to the things that are less priorities for us. So I think Amy just has some very timeless advice for us. So like I said, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. Let me know any of your comments below. And as always, please share any frugal money saving tips. I'm definitely, like I said, always looking at our budget and ways that we can scale back and save. And, you know, and like Amy says, that will vary person to person about what's important to you. Your priorities may look a lot different than mine and vice versa, but that's why we're all individuals and we have unique set of circumstances, but we can all learn from each other. So that's the beauty of YouTube, right? The community here that iron sharpens iron and we can all learn from each other. So as always, I love to hear from you guys. And until next time, I will see you soon. God bless.